Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the LifeRaft Physical Security Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Value, and my guest today is Michael McCabe, CEO of Intelligence Fusion. And Mike, we had a great chat before we hit record about crowdsourced intelligence and some of the interesting work you're doing there. What sparked your interest initially in this topic?
Hi, Robert. So for me, it goes back to probably 2010. So I used to work for a company called Olive Group, and I was based in Basra. So we set up the Business Solutions Operations Center, which was the first joint Iraqi security force, private security company operations center in Iraq's history. And part of what we did there was, it was about information sharing. So there was a Skype group chat that we had, and there was intelligence analysts, security managers from different companies who were operating in the province. And we used that as a way to just share information and achieve a consensus regarding what happened. Because at the time, this was before social media was huge. We'd use things like local media to research incidents. So say, for example, an ID would detonate in Basra City, I might jump onto the Skype chat and say, I've heard there's been an explosion at such and such a location. Anybody else got any information? And throughout the day, we generally add more information that we were hearing from our different sources, and we'd come up with some sort of consensus between us. So, between a group of us, we crowdsourced the actual answer to what happened in that incident. At the time, I sort of came away from Iraq and was thinking, well, why isn't there something like that globally? Why isn't there just a platform that you can log into and share information with interested parties? And that was kind of the part of the sort of initial idea for Intelligence Fusion. And even though that was sort of 12 years ago now, I'd say us as a company, we're only really starting to really have a good go at crowdsourcing. And it's now become huge, which is interesting. But when I was sort of banging on about this about 8 to 10 years ago, there were people who were very negative regarding it because they saw it as being, well, how do you actually police the information that you're receiving? These are sort of questions that we've had to answer over the years as we kind of really push on with crowdsourcing. For me, that's where it all began with that Basra Skype group chat.
And more brains tackling the problem are more effective than just one person alone in a room.
Absolutely.
So let's just kind of maybe take a step back for someone who hasn't heard the term before, might be less familiar. How exactly do you and your team at Intelligence Fusion define crowdsourced intelligence?
So we look at it in terms of it's the act of getting a large group of people, and typically it's the general public, to work together in order to share information. We look at it from an incident perspective. So we're actively out there trying to gather as much information as possible about what's happening globally, which is a huge task in itself. And we see crowdsourcing as being a force multiplier for what we're trying to achieve for a variety of different reasons. Yes, we have 13 full-time analysts from a variety of different nationalities who speak different languages, but in part we lose or we don't get that local context. So it's all well and good me sitting here in the northeast of England and reporting on an incident in Rio. I've never been to Brazil, I've never been to Rio. That local context really comes through from the crowdsourced perspective. Yes, it brings its own challenges in terms of fact-checking the information and putting in place the rigors in order to ensure the information is accurate before we disseminate it to our clients. But for us, we see it as being a force multiplier in terms of increasing our footprint of global coverage, but also that consistency of data and that local flavor as well. That's what we feel we get from the crowdsourcing that we do.
So what kind of projects are you guys working on then at Intelligence Fusion?
I mean, crowdsourcing, it's still fairly new. It's still a fairly new concept, even though there are so many different organizations out there who are doing it, even if they don't know that they're doing it. So we're at the moment kind of trying to test it. We've done it historically with our clients. So we'll have an active network of clients around the world who are fed into our Slack channels, and they'll actually report incidents that we've missed on our platform and then they want us to actually upload. But we're now expanding it to a more broader set of people. So one thing that we've done recently is create a Discord server. So we created that Discord server about 3 months ago. And for people that don't know what Discord is, it was kind of a gamer platform that people can use in order to play games and chat to their friends. I mean, I was kind of trying to sort of pitch this to my board and explain them to what Discord is, and they were saying, well, why don't they use sort of WhatsApp or these sorts of platforms? And kind of chatting to the younger members of staff at Intelligence Fusion, they don't use WhatsApp anymore to chat with their friends. They just sit on Discord servers and they speak and they can sort of share their audio. And there's a lot of really useful features with Discord where it can sort of police the content that's coming through. There are auto translation features. So it's a really, really useful tool. So 3 months ago, we set our Discord community up. We now have over 430 members that are on there from a variety of different backgrounds. A lot of them are OSINT enthusiasts, but there are quite a few sort of security professionals, intelligence professionals that are on there as well. And what they see is exactly what we see in it, is the ability for us to share what we are seeing out there and them to also participate and share what they're seeing as well. So together we're kind of trying to solve this issue of getting that full global intelligence feed as to what's happening around the world. And then for us, once we've kind of proven the concept, we want to get that community to be 10,000 people strong. And then once we're kind of happy that we've really proven that this concept works, our plan is to actually build it into our platform. So kind of move it away from Discord and actually make it part of the Intelligence Fusion platform.
What kind of questions are you guys answering for your customers? What kind of scenarios would you be investigating? So,
we've seen, I've seen crowdsourcing done regularly on Reddit. So a terrorist attack will happen, it's in London, and you'll have 200 people, 200 Reddit participants who are on that channel who are actually sharing information regarding what's happening. Because people want to be, they don't want to just kind of watch the news. Some people want to actually be part of the news and actually engage with it. And I certainly saw this as from the Iraq conflict to then the rise of the Syrian conflict. You had so many more armchair analysts with the sort of rise of social media platforms like Twitter, people out there who are actually sharing information regarding what they're finding. So for us, it's exactly like what they're doing on Reddit. We're collating information regarding a terrorist incident, and so are the people who are on Reddit. And that's kind of in part what we're doing on Discord. But it could be anything from, we've created a channel recently for the Ukraine-Russia crisis. We did one for the COP26 event that happened a few months back. And I think that's kind of where we get a lot more engagement as to where we actually create a very specific channel, and people who are interested in what's happening will then come on and share information. It kind of feeds into one of my bugbears from an intelligence perspective, is just how much duplication of effort there is globally. Every time a terrorist attack happens, we're collecting that information. All of our competitors are, the police, the security services, military, NGOs, journalists, all these different organizations. We're collecting exactly the same information regarding exactly the same incident. And there's so much duplication of effort and wasted resources. So us, with our sort of crowdsourcing initiative and our Discord server, we're trying to reduce that duplication of effort by being open and transparent about what we're gathering, because we feel there's a relationship there that can be had with our Discord users in order to, one, gather the information more quickly by having multiple eyes on the problem, but also having more eyes and expert opinions. It helps put more rigor into our intelligence analysis that we disseminate. So we kind of see multiple aspects that are a benefit. But yeah, there are problems that can be caused from crowdsourcing, like disinformation and misinformation. We have to put in place certain measures to mitigate those issues.
A lot of keywords there that I kind of tune into that I take this conversation a lot of different directions. But one of the things I was thinking about when you mentioned Reddit was just the speed and the context that you can get when a lot of situations pop up. So I remember a few months ago, there was a fire nearby in my neighborhood, and a big explosion and everything like that. And I didn't go to the news networks right away because that would take hours for any story to kind of pop up. On Reddit, everyone's discussing what the issue is, and within a few minutes, it's caused the incident. Obviously, verifying and false rumors is the challenge, but you can just find stuff out so much quicker in those situations.
I think there's kind of that local global perspective for the participant. We look at crowdsourcing from that global perspective. Us as a company, we cover everything from low-level criminality through to hazards, terrorism, and conflict and more. But so I'm from a small town in the northeast of England. I'm on a face group channel within there. There's about 10,000 people from my town, and it's people selling furniture or whatever. But then when incidents happen within my town, you should see how quickly the people gather that information. There was an incident a few months back where it was kind of a stabbing at a local pub, and I was kind of just sitting in the comment section, just watching people bring this up. And it was amazing how quickly they found out who the participants were, what actually happened with the incident. So that's kind of from a local perspective. That's people in a local town using Facebook to kind of crowdsource the data and share information to what they're finding. But then for us, we kind of take it to that more global level. We're trying to find out these major incidents that really impact our clients globally. So I think crowdsourcing it's just starting to get real traction, and people are really starting to understand what it is. But I think this is just going to grow and grow. And I think certainly for our sector, from an intelligence perspective, I think whoever really nails crowdsourcing will really dominate the intelligence realm that we operate in.
I like that point that you made about local versus global. And I just think about sometimes when you have someone from outside an area kind of commenting on how things work. And I've seen it in my own city when people will be talking about it, and it's like, didn't quite get it right. Those subtle contexts which you can capture that local knowledge can be enormously valuable. You've raised a couple of objections and already, or some perspectives that might make people skeptical about using crowdsourced intelligence. And one of them is just policing the information and verifying what people are actually seeing online. How do you respond to people that might be skeptical about that?
there's kind of a few aspects to it. One is crowdsourcing is really being driven now by the technological era. People live their lives through their mobile phones now, and an incident happens on the street, a crime, and you will get people who will just, the first thing they do is they get their phone out, they're taking pictures, they're taking videos. And that's why certain intelligence companies who perhaps source from Twitter do so well, because a lot of times news is broken very quickly on Twitter because people are putting images and videos on there. So I think there's kind of that kind of passive crowdsourcing where people don't really know that their information is being sourced for those reasons, to the active crowdsourcing where you actually have a network of people who are engaged and know what they're doing and know why they're kind of providing that information. And a perfect example is the Ruptly platform. It's kind of the RT news outlet stringer platform. So they will say, there's an incident happening at this location. If you can get us footage of this, we'll pay you $30, something along those lines. So they're crowdsourcing for images and videos. For us, we put intelligent doctrine at the heart of everything we do. So we use the intelligence cycle, direction, collection, processing, and dissemination. And from the processing side, that's the really key part. So we look at collation, evaluation, analysis, integration, interpretation, and we grade all of our sources. So we'll grade sources in terms of their credibility and their reliability to ensure the accuracy of the information. And what we're always trying to achieve is multiplicity and balance in terms of our sources. So, and I say that coming from a realm where I'll often see perhaps some competitors where they'll kind of have multiple sources, which are really just circular reporting of an original source because it's been reported elsewhere from the same original news outlet. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for actual alternate sources that are confirming that that incident did occur. So I think for us, it's about using intelligence doctrine at the heart of everything we do, using training as well. And that's a key thing from our perspective. We sit very much at that tactical level of intelligence, so there's incidents that are happening on the ground. And because our analysts look at such wide geographical regions, covering, perhaps 100 incidents a day, they really get a flavor and an understanding and just a gut feeling for what is normal, what is a normal type of incident. So when certain incidents occur that just don't feel right, they kind of have their spidey senses in relation to that, and they can kind of flag that and go, that doesn't feel right to me. I need to look at a bit more detail at that. The perfect case of that is the Ollie Murs incident where, a few years back, Ollie Murs is a sort of UK pop celebrity, and he tweeted saying, there's a terrorist attack happening in London. I've been locked into a department store. And that wasn't the case at all. It was a couple of guys had a punch up on one of the tube stations. And we looked at that incident and looking at what he said, and then we were looking at the atmospherics and what was happening. We saw nothing to suggest a terrorist attack had occurred. So we reported that on our platform as a security operation. And lo and behold, it then turned out that it was actually, it was just a punch up on the tube station. The key thing there is, if you're using an algorithmic approach and your algorithm is saying, right, 1,000 people are now tweeting saying this is a terrorist attack, that's not the right way. You're not going to get the right answer to that question. Whereas I think the human element is absolutely key, certainly from using crowdsourcing, because I think you need that established baseline that our analysts pick up through their day-to-day research. And then they have the indication by the incident that comes through as to that doesn't feel right, that needs a bit more probing. And wherever possible, we're always looking for those secondary additional sources whilst using our training and using things like the Admiralty skill to weed out sources that are incorrect or trying to be deceptive.
That point about using artificial intelligence sometimes to automate everything, these algorithms can be very easy to game for nefarious state actors. And so having that human check is just so important.
Absolutely.
Another objection that I could imagine is crowdsourcing is just companies that are very skeptical about sharing their data and information. It's usually very expensive to kind of accumulate this kind of stuff. It can be very proprietary. So what would be your response to that?
I mean, going back to the Basra example from 2010, that's exactly what we saw. People were happy to share information in the moment because they get some value from it. But often if it was something that perhaps had happened to them or their company, there are clearly confidentiality issues, which can be an issue regarding the sharing information. And then it comes back to the old idea of knowledge is power, and people will keep that information to themselves because they think it gives them some sort of value. We're not like that at all. We're completely open and transparent about how we operate. And we think that is the best way to kind of come at this issue. Because I've been invited to multiple of these sort of JSARC events where they talk about, right, what about the issue of knife crime in London? What can we do about it? And things like data trusts are brought up where they talk about, right, let's share all the information that we have. And I've never seen that kind of been put into place. But that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to just create this data trust between commercial and non-commercial organizations organizations, individuals who just have an interest in kind of doing some good. I think the key thing for us is it's kind of that democratization of data, that democratization of information. And there are loads of really interesting organizations who are out there doing crowdsourcing for good. I mean, we sponsor an organization called TraceLabs, and they have these capture the flag events. So, the capture the flag events originally came from cybersecurity professionals. These would be white hat hackers who they would set up sort of vulnerabilities as a game, and they would actually have to flag these vulnerabilities. Now, what TraceLabs have done, rather than these cyber vulnerabilities, they're getting cyber professionals and OSINT professionals to actually find missing people. So they'll have an event, they'll perhaps have 5 to 12 missing people globally, and these names have been provided by law enforcement professionals. And the law enforcement professionals might say something along the lines of, this person's been missing for a couple of years. There's quite a lot online about this person. We think your community might be able to help us actually locate them. And then you've got perhaps 100 teams of 4 people are out there trying to find this person online. So actually crowdsourcing, trying to crowd solve this issue of where this missing person is. And they've had amazing successes. And there's one, so we had them on our podcast, and they were talking to us about this one event that they had in Toronto. It was a live event. They had Toronto police there with them. And there was a missing person who'd been missing for like 2 years. And within 2 hours, one of the participants found a YouTube video of the missing person getting into a truck. They were able to pause the video, find the license plate. They actually gave that to the Toronto police during the event. A couple of days later, the Toronto police then sent out a vehicle to the address who actually located the missing person. So there's amazing projects out there that people can get involved in. And the bar to entry for these projects is very low. It's, if you're an OSINT enthusiast, you can join these projects. But there's amazing projects out there that are using crowdsourcing now that people can get involved with. But as with everything, people will attempt to adapt them and change them to their own wills, as we see with disinformation and misinformation, not with these sorts of projects, but certainly for what we do where there are established narratives that people want to get out. Just look at Russia and Ukraine now and the sort of the information warfare that's going on regarding what's happening and what may cause this conflict to erupt. These are the sort of issues that us as a company doing crowdsourcing from an intelligence perspective, looking at incidents and geopolitics, these are the things that we have to weed out.
It would be interesting to see what you guys are seeing with misinformation in that part of the world right now. I'm glad you mentioned TraceLabs there, because that's kind of where I want to take the conversation next, is just, some practical takeaways for someone that maybe wants to embrace this concept. So I can kind of see this going in 2 ways and 2 audiences that I want to address. One might be the corporate intelligence analyst or maybe just an OSINT enthusiast that wants to get involved. But I'd also like to talk about from the perspective of a security director that would like to start using some of this concept to safeguard their organization. So in terms of, let's start with that first one, either the OSINT or the in-house analyst that wants to embrace crowdsourced intelligence. Where would you suggest that they get started?
I mean, YouTube, just go to YouTube and type in, open source investigation methods, open source intelligence tools, and there's a lot of really good videos on there and great trainers who are providing free content. So, YouTube is a fantastic first place to go to. Then once you're a bit more confident, try a TraceLabs event. Just join, you don't have to have a team. You can just go and say, look, I need to join a team. Is there anybody who can join? And generally people will find other people to kind of do the event with. And TraceLabs have so many fantastic resources. They've got this virtual machine, which comes with all these cyber tools that you can use, as well as just generic open source intelligence tools. And I think it's all well and good doing the theoretical part of open source intelligence and crowdsourcing. It's another to then put it into practice. And that's where things like TraceLabs are really good, because you're actually putting it into practice for a good cause. And then depending on what your interest is, if you're interested in incidents and conflict and geopolitics, you could join a Discord server like Intelligence Fusions. But there are other Discord servers out there for organizations like Bellingcat. TraceLabs have their own Discord server out there. You can join there. So for us on ours, we kind of break it down by different geographical channels. And within there, you can engage with our senior and our junior analysts and ask them questions regarding regions. But we also have like a resources section where if we find, right, that's a really good tool to actually auto-translate, as you're reading the web, we'll put that in there as well. And so, yeah, and once you get involved, you kind of join the community and you find yourself branching off into other initiatives and other groups and other LinkedIn channels or whatever it is. But yeah, I think the first step for me would be to just go on YouTube and kind of learn a bit about open source intelligence and crowdsourcing, and then try joining perhaps a Discord server or join the TraceLabs and capture the flag event.
Is there a big technical barrier to kind of participating in these things? Do I need to be like a super cybersecurity expert for that?
No, absolutely not. There's loads of tools on there that are, from TraceLab's perspective, they are quite technical, but I didn't use them. I kind of substituted for a friend of mine, he had a team called the Mandalorians. Their first Trace Labs event, they came third. And a person couldn't do the next event, so I was asked to substitute. And I said to them, clearly, if we come any lower than third, it's my fault because I'm the different actor here amongst our team. Luckily, we came third again.
So you were in the clear. You were.
Yeah, absolutely. But we kind of, certainly for myself, coming from a military intelligence background, OSINT is kind of where I sit. If you're good at researching, if you're good at, looking at Facebook or looking at Twitter and finding people on YouTube and following that branch of knowledge, you'll do fine. And, you're not expected to kind of find these people. In part, it's enjoyable because you're doing something for good, but there's a bonus there if you actually manage to provide any information that could find that person. So no, I think, as long as you have an interest and perhaps you can look at research regarding open source intelligence, it's a fairly low bar to get involved in this.
Right. There's no penalty if you screw up.
No, absolutely not.
Kind of taking this more inside like a business or an organization. So say I'm a security manager or security director. Do you have any insights on how someone in one of those positions could start exploiting crowdsourced intelligence to safeguard their organization?
In part, the people who engage with us on Discord and join our Discord server, so we've got like security managers, we've got directors of intelligence who are on there because they're seeing value from it. They can share information with us and they can then engage with our analysts and ask them questions. And our analysts who look at these regions on a regular basis can provide them with their own insight. So you can do that straight away. I mean, often what it is we're trying to solve very specific problems to our organization, and often what people are lacking is that historical context or situational awareness regarding perhaps a location or a topic. And I think that's where this can be of real value to people. Before I founded Intelligence Fusion and we had our platform, I'd do outsourced intelligence consultancy to some organizations. Say, for example, there was a road move from one location in Africa to another location and they didn't have a platform or a database of historical incidents. I'd have to be spending 2 or 3 days gathering that historical data so I could then write the threat assessment in relation to it. So that was my kind of problem space at the time. And I'm sure security managers and people from organizations have their own problem spaces. And these are environments where people can come, engage, and perhaps ask questions and get those questions answered by people who are already looking at that issue. So, I mean, we regularly put out pictorial intelligence summaries regarding incidents or write free analysis that goes out there. Yeah, it's for marketing purposes. We want people to come to our website, get in the top of the funnel, and hopefully they eventually become clients. But, there are lots of other organizations out there who are doing what we're doing who, if they're happy to engage with crowdsourcing and get value from their community, by providing value, you can get that from these sorts of groups.
You kind of mentioned earlier about how you see this kind of space playing up and who's going to really capture the market over the next 5 or 10 years and the importance of crowdsourced intelligence for that. So give me your crystal ball, Michael, of how do you see this space playing out over the next, say, decade or so?
Purely from an intelligence sector perspective, you've got the SMEs who they focus on very specific locations or very specific topics who know a lot about their area. You've then got the crisis management companies who perhaps have an intelligence who will focus on specific areas where they have operations. Then you've got the providers like ourselves who purely focus on intelligence. When I set up Intelligence Fusion, I didn't want us to do security consultancy or the other things because I felt like it slightly diluted our offering. We are very, very focused on, we do tactical level intelligence. I think in part, you see some of the bigger players who can afford to perhaps take the Twitter fire hose, who are doing crowdsourcing through passive data sets, people who don't know that their data is being used for what it's being used for. And then you've got providers like us, where we're trying to create an active network of professionals, which adds a lot more weight to the data that they're providing. And we can then, rather than just kind of using people or passively to kind of ask these questions, we're actually crowd-solving issues together. And so real crowdsourcing regarding what's happening. Us personally, we're called Intelligence Fusion for a reason. We fuse data mining with machine learning, internal collection, and crowdsourcing. And I think what we're generally trying to do as intelligence providers is we're trying to provide speed of incident reporting. We're trying to provide depth, so a map that is covered in pins, not having gaps in certain countries because they don't tweet. We're trying to provide the consistency of coverage as well as the so what factor. So it's all well and good us saying this incident happened here. What we should also be saying is, and this is why it is important to you, because this is a very expensive issue to solve, certainly smaller companies like my own, we have to do it through by using things like crowdsourcing as a force multiplier, because we don't have that local context in certain regions. We've got certain nationalities who are full-time members on our team. There are certain areas where we're kind of coming at it from a blind perspective because we're just looking at these issues from no knowledge at all. And I think it has to be a blended approach if you're going to answer all of those questions. And then the big one, of course, is about being predictive with intelligence, which is a key one for me and something that I think can be done. But I think you've got to have that consistency of data first, because that allows you to kind of pick out those historical patterns and trends and then say, right, this is historically what we've seen. Based on our analysis, we'll likely see these patterns and trends happen in the future. So I think whoever ends up really dominating the space, they have to be able to answer all of those questions, and they have to be doing intelligence from the tactical to the strategic level. We focus very much on the tactical level because it's easier for us to then go to the operational and strategic level. It's much more difficult for someone who's just kind of sitting there writing about what's the geopolitical outlook for the Middle East to then come down to our level and do this tactical level data. So I'm painting a very, very difficult problem that we're all trying to solve. But I think if you can fuse data mining, machine learning with internal connection and crowdsourcing, and really get that crowdsourced network to work, as well as operating between those levels of tactical, operational, strategic, I think that's the player who will end up dominating this space.
So, Michael, we're coming up at the end of the hour, which is all I promised to steal from you today, but I appreciate you coming on to our show and sharing your insights with our listeners. What is the main takeaway that you want listeners to remember from our conversation?
I think it's that crowdsourcing isn't something to be feared, which when I was sort of banging on about this about 10 years ago, that's all I was getting from kind of fellow professionals of, well, this is going to cause so many issues. And what about if you're trying to incentivize them, they're just going to give you information that is inaccurate. Is with the advance in technology, as well as a generation that are coming through now who want to get involved. They want to do good and want to see the democratization of data. Is that crowdsourcing isn't something to be feared. It's something that can do real good. You've got trace styles, but you've also got things like, Europol, they do this Stop Child Abuse Trace and Object initiative where they will actually provide images which are coming from child abuse cases. And these might be kind of select portions of images. It might show a T-shirt, it might show an object. And what they're trying to do is crowdsource where that location is, so it helps them with what they're trying to do in terms of trying to solve this case. So I think there are a lot of really interesting initiatives where crowdsourcing is really starting to do good. This is only going to grow in the future. So I think not to be afraid of crowdsourcing, and if it's of interest and you kind of feel there's some value that you'll get from it and you can provide value to some of the initiatives, I'd say get involved.
Well, it's definitely an exciting time to be in the space.
Absolutely.
And if listeners want to reach out, what's the best way to get in touch?
So, our website's intelligencefusion.co.uk. I can send over a link, perhaps you can stick it in the description box for our Discord server, and people can join and engage with myself, all my senior analysts and our junior analysts and the team at IF. So, yeah, that's probably the best place is our Discord server.
I'll definitely put that link in the show notes for everybody. All right, Michael, thanks for joining me today.
No, thanks, Robert. I really appreciate it. It was good.
Again, that was Michael McCabe, CEO of Intelligence Fusion. That's all for this week's show. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to these episodes. And if you'd like to learn more about building a successful threat intelligence program, be sure to check out our website at liferaftinc.com. That's liferaftinc.com. And I hope you tune in next time.